The human mind and body are ill-prepared for an artistic journey into automotive video creation. The interwoven fabric of passion and design will transcend viewers out of the sewers and into an ocean odyssey of puritanical value propositions, combining unbridled business decisions and free-range creativity. Using either your finger or USB HID to activate the subscribe button and thumbs up icon will transition you away from recommendations of feeble-minded drivel into the next generation of content. Check out our merch. We are featuring 24-karat gold chains and exclusive launch edition autographed energy drink cans.
Inside the 2021 Honda Odyssey. Now, I want to preface this video by saying this is the Elite trim level, making it the most expensive Honda Odyssey you can buy. It comes in at nearly $50,000. So it's important when you're watching this video that you understand what trim level gets what and what you can live with and live without. So with that said, let's talk about the interior electronics. Now, when it comes to the interior electronics of the Honda Odyssey, I'm going to break it down into two camps: your infotainment and your safety features. Now, the safety suite that's equipped in this car is called Honda Sensing, and its core features that you're going to notice are preemptive braking, lane keep assist, lane departure warning, and adaptive cruise control. All features that should, in theory, reduce some of the anxiety you have while operating a vehicle. You also have cabin talk and cabin watch, which are systems baked into the head unit itself or the infotainment. Cabin talk is an intercom system you have to interface with your second and third row occupants without having to scream at them like you normally would have to. And cabin watch is essentially a nanny cam for your second and third row occupants, where you get a live feed in your head unit of what they're doing using the rear seat cameras. The infotainment system itself is mostly what you've seen before in other Honda vehicles or Honda products. It's a mix of physical and touch controls. The menu structure itself looks fairly dated, but is fairly intuitive to use. Now, when it comes to the ergonomics for the front seat occupants in the Odyssey, it's kind of a mixed bag, and there's a weird misstep in attention to detail. So when it comes to storage solutions, Honda knocks it out of the park. You have a great tiered setup for your door cards, which allows you to organize your various knickknacks very logically. It's a very intuitive setup. Your center console area has a tremendous amount of cargo capacity. You have a nice triple layered setup. You have this enormous cargo cubby out here that is entirely open. That should be large enough for a small backpack or a large purse. You have two distinct and separate cargo solutions in this armrest itself. You have this trapdoor method for your primary area. You have a nice tiered or organizable setup for this drawer. The glove box itself is also huge. The driving position in this car is great if you're looking for a nice command of the road. It provides that without having to be 10 feet up in the sky. The driving position itself should accommodate a large variety of body types. Now, my big problem with this cabin is the overabundance of glossy black plastic. Now, forgive me while I get up on a soapbox. This car almost has no miles in it, and it looks like an outhouse in certain areas. Everything's scratched. There's oil on everything. It looks disgusting and detracts from what is otherwise a brilliant cabin. The rear occupant space in the Odyssey, I want to break down into two distinct sections: its ability to carry people comfortable, and its usefulness in carrying things. Now, passenger comfort is brilliant. The center row is configurable, so you can in theory do two captain's chairs or the pseudo bench. The seats themselves can slide forward and aft and tilt, and they're actually very, very comfortable. And the third row, when you have it configured correctly, is actually not a burden to get into. You could be a smaller adult and fit back there entirely comfortably. Now, when all the seats are folded flat or pulled out of this vehicle, it's also a very, very usable package. There is almost a cargo van-esque level of available space in this thing. However, actually pulling out the second row and trying to configure this vehicle is a massive pain. Unlike in the Pacifica that has a stow and go ability where the seats themselves fold into the floor pan of the vehicle, you have to physically remove the seats out of the Odyssey. And if you're a smaller man or woman, you're going to struggle. These things are extraordinarily heavy, which again is a big detractor when compared to the Pacifica. There are, however, some nice attention to details. There's a much joked about shop vac found in the Honda Odyssey, but it's actually incredibly useful. Again, you're going to be using this thing and getting it dirty, and the fact that Honda was smart enough to put a vacuum cleaner in the Odyssey is actually brilliant. It's a great thought. So with that said, let's head into the shop and get this thing on the lift.
We are under the refreshed Honda Odyssey, which occurred in 2021, but for 2022, it's all the same. But this has a minor evolution over the course of its life cycle, so let's talk about it.
You have new front and rear fascias. You have Honda sensing now as standard, and that's a safety feature that I talked about earlier in the interior segment. And now you have a 10-speed automatic across the entire trim level lineup. In the past, you got a 9-speed for the lower trim levels.
In the LX.
Yes.
So, what do we have under the hood?
We have a 3.5-liter Earth Dreams engine. It makes about 280 horsepower, returns reasonable fuel economy. But what's unique about this drivetrain in this segment is it does not have all-wheel drive.
And it does continue to carry over the variable cylinder management, which kind of was problematic on the older engines. And this is how it returns better highway fuel economy. It also adds in start-stop. But the rest of this is largely a carryover. This suspension is tuned on the softer side compared to its competitors, which is a great thing that we'll talk about. They try to do the things that people really want. Despite not having all-wheel drive, it still has this great feel to it.
It is probably one of the better driving minivans in the segment. You have strut front with these enormous...
It looks like railroad tracks from the 1800s, the steel they used on the knuckles, as you can see. It does have aluminum lower control arms, and there's aluminum in the back, but you do have a multi-link.
Yep.
They integrate the bump stop into the lower control arm, and that's probably a good place for packaging because they have to lower the suspension down to get that load floor lowered in the back for cargo capacity.
Minivans are actually one of the more difficult products to engineer just due to all the packaging constraints associated with them. It's almost like an esoteric sports car.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, I think, in the Sienna video. There's a lot more that goes into this. And just look at it. I mean, it's difficult to package all this with the fuel cell, the brake lines, the way they got to run the exhaust. So you get these weird gaps in here that don't have covers on it. And part of this is they have to balance out aerodynamics, NVH, and as you move up into the upper trim levels, you get acoustic laminated glass. So just know that if you're looking for more of the budget entry, they do have a cheaper option. But as you move up, it gets quieter, more refined, and all of that.
The last thing I want to talk about is braking. They updated the brake booster for 2021 to give you a more progressive or natural feeling braking system. The brakes in this car, despite its enormous mass, is actually pretty decent.
They do feel very confidence-inspiring, and one thing I will say about that brake booster, how it translates into real-world feel, is Honda typically had this on and off brake pedal. You kind of breathe on it, and you get all this all-at-once type feel. This is not that way. It does, you kind of lean into it more. It's more natural and relaxing to operate.
Yep.
Let's get this on the road, Jack, and see how it drives.
All right.
Honda Odyssey Elite. Let's try to do a drive that embodies kind of what the owners of this car are going to do, Jack.
Exactly. So I know you went to a track day the other day in your Honda Odyssey Elite. Tell me about its driving dynamics.
Well, after I got off the podium, I took this thing, loaded it up full of multiple car seats, and it was so comfortable to drive. This thing is absolutely incredible to operate every day. It's just compliant enough, it handles just well enough that you really enjoy operating this, more so than pretty much every other minivan. The only thing that comes close to this, the Pacifica, and a lot of that has to do with the V6, but this thing sounds way better, it responds way better, and...
Show me, Mark.
Yeah, well, I'm going to show you everything you need to know.
Now, the regular minivan driver does that all the time. They really do take their vehicles to redline, and this is proof that when Honda puts effort into their drivetrains, they make some of the best engines currently available.
Yeah, I'm going to miss this V6 when they start phasing it out to 4-cylinder turbos and hybrids and all that. And I know we're joking around a lot about this, but part of the pleasure of operating this is such a balance between drivability and softness, compliance, usability, and having a transmission that is not a CVT. It still has a little bit of responsiveness to it. You have confidence that you're going to get out, you're going to pull out in traffic, and it doesn't feel like you're driving a total dog.
This is way better to drive than the prior generation Pilot we got out of. This is proof to me that if you need to haul things and a lot of people, the minivan is still clearly the better choice over most compromised SUVs. This thing handles a lot like a car.
It does. And so what do people want to know? Comfort level is tremendous. It's one of the softer in the segment. It's softer than the new Sienna I drove. It's softer than the Pacifica. It doesn't have such sharp reflexes. And when I say sharp, it's not a twitchy car. So it's very comfortable. You could sit here with your seat back and kind of just leisurely steer it with one hand without changing the direction of it, which is good. You do not want this to fatigue you. No. I feel like this has a perfect relaxing character to it, and the overall noise floor is pretty low in this as well, which is great because you don't want to be bombarded with a ton of wind noise, and they do a good job, at least on this trim level. In the front occupant area, it's not fatiguing.
It's an incredibly comfortable car to be in. And again, for what you do primarily with your vehicle, that's sit in traffic, go to stores, pick up your kids, this is the right cabin space and the right driving experience. And this car isn't totally devoid of life, in my opinion, like the Sienna is. Yes, the Sienna's got all-wheel drive. Yes, the Sienna has far better fuel economy, but the engine in this car is such a welcome change compared to most of the, hell, even the CUVs we were driving.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think, you know, from a person who likes to drive, you know, the engine is a highlight. The Trans, 10 gears, I still feel like it's way too much. You don't get into the 10th speed or 10th gear until you're like above 65. And there is some weird downshifting shock that it does as it's gear hunting to get you in that optimal gear. If I had one knock on it, it's some of the transmission programming. We're not talking about fun to drive. We're just talking about everyday driving that you notice this. Sometimes it'll give you that hesitation or clunk. But for somebody that is looking for a minivan, I hate to say this over the Pacifica, I think the drivability, the character of some of the interior space trumps the Pacifica's usability in terms of the seating configuration, which I hate having to remove the seats in the back of this, where the stow and go is way better than this at this point, but I'd almost choose this from a driving perspective.
I think the interior space is better in the Pacifica. I think there's a better attention to detail, like the stow and go options.
Yes.
You can just fold the seats into the floor, and it makes it as usable as basically a cargo van. This, you have to fight with some of the interior space. There's way too much glossy black plastic in this place, but the driving experience, despite not having all-wheel drive, is far superior.
Yeah, agreed. So let's get into the final thoughts, Jack, and talk about all the things that you want to know about the Odyssey Elite. Final thoughts on the Honda Odyssey. This is the first time we've had this van, so we went over it with a fine-tooth comb. So here it is, the pros. This is the softest riding van in the segment. It is unbelievably comfortable, and they fixed some of the thing with that on and off brake pedal, so it is very relaxed to drive. Even the steering. It's one of those that you just get in and you can ride it in it all day. If you're looking for something a little bit edgier, that's not this. And I think Honda knows their clientele quite well, and that's why this has been such a top seller for so long. The interior space, while it might not be as ultra modern as the new Sienna, it definitely is more easy to use. There is some questionable material choice in here for a minivan, but again, you know, you're gonna probably get over that. Technology pretty much works, and one of the nice things is Honda has added a few features here like the cabin video monitor and the cabin talk combined, and they're doing over-the-air updates to the previous model year van. So just know that Honda is now giving you these technology features, and they're able to update certain bugs or fix things over the air without you having to go to the dealership, which is nice. Now, usability, Again, comfortable is great, but that magic second row, as they term it, there's great adjustability in that second row. The way the seats adjust, it's amazing until you have to remove those seats. And that's where something like the Pacifica blows this away. So there's not one perfect minivan for everybody, but this definitely is super compelling. And you're gonna have to think about it. Drive them all, do your research on reliability. Honda had some issues with VCM in the past and the Trans, but now that they moved to the 10-speed, some of that should be mitigated. I really like driving this, and so did Jack. In fact, we spent a lot of time driving this. That's how comfortable it was. But thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
You can support Savage Geese on Patreon or buy one of their USA-made premium, best-in-class t-shirts. Part of the proceeds will get donated to American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.